Keanu Reeves saves elderly woman from heart attack on road. It was a quiet afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind where the sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets. Keanu Reeves was driving his vintage motorcycle down a less crowded road, enjoying the solitude. He had just finished a long day of filming and was on his way to meet a friend for coffee. The wind brushed against his face, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. But life, as he knew, had a way of throwing unexpected twists. As he approached a bend in the road, he noticed a car pulled over to the side. An elderly woman was standing outside, clutching her chest, her face contorted in pain. Keanu slowed down, his instincts kicking in. He pulled over and rushed to her side. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm but urgent. The woman, frail and trembling, could barely speak. "My chest, it hurts. I can't breathe." She managed to gasp. Keanu immediately recognized the signs of a heart attack. Without hesitation, he helped her sit down on the grass and dialed 911. But he knew that time was critical. He remembered the basic first aid training he had taken years ago and began to guide her through slow, deep breaths. "Stay with me, ma'am. Help is on the way," he reassured her, his voice steady. As they waited for the ambulance, Keanu noticed a small crowd gathering. People were filming on their phones, whispering his name. But he didn't care about the attention. His focus was entirely on the woman. He kept talking to her, distracting her from the pain, asking about her family, her life. She told him her name was Margaret and that she was on her way to visit her grandson. The ambulance arrived within minutes and the paramedics took over. Keanu stayed by Margaret's side until she was safely inside the vehicle. As the ambulance drove away, he felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. He didn't know if she would make it, but he had done everything he could. The incident left him shaken. He thought about how fragile life was, how one moment could change everything. He decided to skip the coffee meetup and headed home instead. That night, he couldn't sleep. Margaret's face kept appearing in his mind, her voice echoing in his thoughts. The next morning, Keanu woke up to a barrage of messages and calls. The video of him helping Margaret had gone viral. News outlets were calling him a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He had just done what anyone would have done, or at least what he hoped anyone would do. As the days passed, the story faded from the headlines. But Keanu couldn't forget Margaret. He wondered if she had survived, if she was okay. He decided to visit the hospital where she had been taken. When he arrived, he was directed to the cardiac ward. The nurse at the desk recognized him immediately. "Mr. Reeves, it's so good to see you. Margaret has been asking about you," she said with a smile. Keanu felt a wave of relief. Margaret was alive. He followed the nurse to her room, where he found her sitting up in bed, looking much better than the last time he had seen her. "Margaret, I'm so glad you're okay," he said, his voice filled with genuine emotion. Margaret's eyes lit up when she saw him. "Keanu, you saved my life. I can't thank you enough." They talked for a while, sharing stories and laughter. Margaret told him about her grandson, who was a huge fan of his movies. Keanu promised to send him an autographed photo. Before he left, Margaret took his hand and said, "You're a good man, Keanu. Never forget that." Her words stayed with him long after he left the hospital. They reminded him of the importance of kindness, of being there for others when they needed it most. He realized that life wasn't about fame or success. It was about the connections we make, the lives we touch. As he drove home, Keanu made a decision. He would use his platform to do more good, to help people in ways that went beyond his movies. He didn't know exactly what that would look like yet, but he knew it was something he had to do. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Keanu's encounter with Margaret had left a profound impact on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that life had given him a wake-up call, a reminder of what truly mattered. Over the next few weeks, he began to channel his energy into something bigger than himself. He started researching organizations that help the elderly, particularly those struggling with health issues and loneliness. He even reached out to a few charities, offering his time and resources. One day, while scrolling through his emails, he came across a message from a small nonprofit called Hearts for the Elderly. They thanked him for his recent donation and invited him to visit one of their community centers. Intrigued, Keanu decided to take them up on the offer. The community center was located in a modest neighborhood, far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. When Keanu arrived, he was greeted by a warm, bustling atmosphere. Elderly men and women sat around tables, chatting, playing games, and sharing stories. The staff moved about with smiles, offering tea and snacks. It was a place of connection, a sanctuary for those who might otherwise feel forgotten. As Keanu toured the facility, he noticed a familiar face sitting by the window. It was Margaret. She looked up and her eyes widened in surprise. "Keanu, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed, her voice filled with joy. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, smiling as he sat down beside her. Margaret explained that she had started volunteering at the center after her recovery. "I realized how lucky I was to have someone like you come to my aid that day. I wanted to give back, to help others who might not have anyone to turn to." Her words struck a chord with Keanu. He spent the rest of the afternoon listening to the stories of the people at the center. There was George, a retired teacher who had lost his wife and found solace in teaching chess to kids. There was Maria, who had immigrated to the country decades ago and now spent her days knitting blankets for homeless shelters. Each person had a story, a life filled with triumphs and tragedies. As the sun began to set, Keanu made a quiet promise to himself. He would do more than just donate money. He would use his voice, his influence to shine a light on the work being done at places like this. He would help create a world where no one felt invisible. Over the next few months, Keanu became a regular visitor at the center. He didn't come as a celebrity, he came as a friend. He played chess with George, listened to Maria's stories, and even helped organize a fundraising event. The media caught wind of his involvement, but this time, he didn't shy away from the attention. He wanted people to know about the center, about the importance of community and compassion. The fundraising event was a huge success. Thanks to Keanu's efforts, Hearts for the Elderly received enough donations to expand their services. They opened new centers in underserved areas, reaching even more people in need. Keanu felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. But life, as always, had another twist in store. One evening, as Keanu was leaving the center, he received a call from Margaret's grandson, Ethan. His voice was trembling. "Mr. Reeves, it's about my grandma. She's in the hospital again. The doctors say it's serious this time." Keanu's heart sank. He rushed to the hospital, where he found Margaret lying in a hospital bed, her face pale but her spirit unbroken. She smiled weakly when she saw him. "Keanu, you're here," she whispered. "Of course I am," he replied, taking her hand. Margaret's condition was critical. The doctors explained that her heart was failing, and there wasn't much they could do. Keanu stayed by her side, holding her hand and listening as she shared her final thoughts. "You've done so much good, Keanu," she said. "Don't stop now. Keep helping people. Keep reminding them that they matter." Tears filled Keanu's eyes as he nodded. "I will, Margaret. I promise." Margaret passed away that night, surrounded by her family and Keanu. Her loss was deeply felt, but her legacy lived on. Keanu knew he had to honor her memory by continuing the work they had started together. In the months that followed, Keanu launched a foundation in Margaret's name, dedicated to supporting the elderly and fostering intergenerational connections. He traveled across the country, visiting community centers, hospitals, and schools, spreading a message of kindness and compassion. The story of how Keanu Reeves saved an elderly woman from a heart attack on the road became more than just a viral moment. It became a turning point, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a ripple effect, changing lives in ways we may never fully understand. And as Keanu stood on stage at the opening of a new Hearts for the Elderly Center, looking out at the faces of the people he had helped, he knew that Margaret's spirit was with him. She had shown him the true meaning of heroism, and he would carry that lesson with him for the rest of his life. True heroism lies not in grand gestures, but in the small acts of kindness that remind people they are seen, valued, and loved. A single moment of compassion can change lives and inspire a legacy of goodness that lasts far beyond our time.